Hello. In my video, I'll discuss the four concepts of cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology is the study of how people think and learn through their mental processes such as memory, attention, and thinking, while also using theories such as working memory and long-term memory to help explain how we learn. For instance, in the textbook Educational Psychology Developing Learners, it is stated that people are selective about what they mentally process and learn. This leads me to the four concepts I will discuss. So, the first concept I will discuss is the working memory, or also known as short term memory. Working memory holds what we are actively learning on for a short amount of time. The reason we do this is to make sense of the information we are trying to process. This concept is important for subjects such as math, reading, and science because it is how we process certain information, such as reading comprehension, solving math, and science problems. That said, I have come to realize that working memory has influenced my personal learning experiences. And the reason I say this is that I tend to get anxious and overwhelm myself with information, especially in subjects that I struggle with, like math and science. And I did not realize until now that the reason I always struggled in those areas was that I was overloading my working memory to the point where I could not focus on one problem, making it harder for my working memory to process the information. This leads me to my next concept, maintenance rehearsal. The article Working Memory Underpins Cognitive Development, Learning, and Education, published by the National Library of Medicine. In their article, it stated that without sufficient working memory, the information would be lost before you could combine it to a coherent, complete thought. This is where maintenance rehearsal comes into play. Maintenance rehearsal is when you keep information in your working memory for as long as you need it. For example, if you have a quiz on the science material you just learned and worry you might forget it before the quiz, you might try different ways to remember this information, such as taking your notes with you and reviewing them until the quiz. This also helps you retain the information from your working memory temporarily so you can remember it during the test. With that being said, a way I envision applying maintenance rehearsal in my classroom is by providing study guides and follow along notes. Giving my students a study guide at the beginning of the week and having them answer the questions on it will give them something to review for the information before the test on Friday. Additionally, providing students with a follow along notes offers them another way to review specific information needed for an assignment I will assign later in the lesson that is on the same day. By incorporating these two strategies in my future classrooms, I will help students remember important information for as long as they need it, applying the concept of maintenance rehearsal. The third concept I will discuss is long term memory. Now, long term memory is where you store knowledge gained from your personal experiences in growing up, such as your values and beliefs. However, long term memory also includes things you have learned through classroom instruction, such as remembering all 50 states or that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Long term memory is also where you can store information about how to perform actions that you have been taught, such as riding a bike or me personally pitching a softball or hitting a softball. With that in mind, a way to incorporate long term memory into my future classroom is to use my students' personal experiences or beliefs, which will help them connect to the topic we are discussing. For example, in the article Long Term Memory, a review and meta analysis of studies of declarative and procedural memory in specific language impairment, published by the National Library of Medicine, it stated in their article that unlike declarative memory, procedural memory is better suited to learning consecutively or learning pattern-based structure information. This includes learning new motor and perceptual skills and forming associations between pieces of verbal or visual information that are probabilistically or statistically structured. Therefore, another way I could help my students retain information long term is by implementing visual imagery into my lessons, such as political cartoons or artifacts. The fourth and final concept I will discuss is meaningful learning, which connects to long-term memory just as maintenance rehearsal connects to working memory. So, meaningful learning is where you connect new information that you have learned and connect to knowledge that is stored in your long-term memory. Meaningful learning revolves around comprehension and understanding rather than memorization because it is believed to be more successful when information is retained in a long-term memory. The reason is that they are making connection between what they are learning and something that they have already learned, making the topic more meaningful, such as connections from their personal lives, like their beliefs or values. Therefore, a meaningful learning has impacted my personal learning experiences is by making connections to what I already know and relating it to that specific topic. For instance, I have always struggled in science. However, a way I managed to understand the topics we were discussing, such as friction or Newton's law, is by connecting it to softball, like pitching, hitting a ball, or how long it took for the ball to hit the ground, and if it stopped instantly or kept rolling until it hit the fence. This way, I was able to make sense of the information I was being taught and remember it because I made it a meaningful connection between something I already knew and something new I was learning. To this day, I remember Newton's law because I stored it in my long-term memory by implementing the concept of meaningful learning. Thank you for watching. I hope you have learned more about working memory and maintenance rehearsal, as long as long-term memory and meaningful learning, and ways you can implement them to impact your personal learning experiences. Thank you and have a great day.